Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. In today's class, we will learn how to answer section A for PS01 paper, that is for Oxford International AQA Psychology A levels. This lesson will be equally useful to those doing the linear curriculum, that is the UK curriculum, because the topic of memory comes in that syllabus too, and the nature of the questions is exactly the same. Recently, I've been doing predicted and past papers for the UK AQA curriculum, so I have some requests that I should do international curriculum as well. When it comes to international Oxford AQA, many students are not very clear on how to understand the questions that are given, what are the requirements according to command terms, how to refer to the marks to decide how many points to give, how much time to allot to each question, etc. So, all of that I will be covering in this video. I'm an international tutor for psychology and a school teacher for A levels. I've been tutoring AQA students for 9+ years now, both UK curriculum and international curriculum students. So, if you're looking to schedule your classes with me, I'm leaving my personal contact number and email ID in the description box and pinned comment below. So, you can contact me from there. Okay, in today's class, my approach is going to be to explain to you mainly how to answer the paper. I will be writing outlines like of suggested answers, but I'm not going to go very deep into actually writing the answers. I have done that in quite a few past of my past videos. You can check the playlist dedicated to Oxford AQA psychology, and there, if you need help with actually writing down a full answer, full paragraphs of answers, you can get that support from there. So today it's going to be mainly about understanding the paper requirements and just jotting down some possible points for the answers that we could write. So let's begin. As you know, the entire paper is for 90 minutes, which comes to 30 minutes per section because there are 3 sections. So for the first section, you're having 30 minutes for 30 marks. So as students like to go by the rule, 1 mark for 1 minute. You can devote 1 minute to, writing for 1 mark. Definitely, that makes sense. Even UK AQA students go by that rule. Definitely for a longer answer, be it a 20 mark or 12 marker in your case, or for UK AQA students a 16 or 12 marker. For that, you need ample time. So I would suggest definitely at least 20 minutes for a 20 marker. If not that, preferably, in fact, you should have more than 20 minutes, say 25 minutes. But I know it can be very tedious to complete the remaining answers in just 5 minutes. That's like asking for too much. So even I would suggest you go by the rule of 1 mark per minute. So accordingly, if it's a 1 mark question, complete it in 1 minute. If it's a 2 marks question, complete it in 2 minutes, and so forth. So that is about time allotment in the paper. Preferably, if say there is a 3 marker question, you can complete it in 1 or 2 minutes. That can be very useful. You can save that much time to devote to your essay answer. I know that much of rationing is not possible practically, but just to say, just a rough idea of how you should be going about it. Take it in that spirit. Okay, lots of students also tell me when it comes to the Oxford AQA curriculum, past papers are not available to them easily unless their teachers are sharing them with them. So that is true. So definitely you can follow my videos. In some of the past videos also I have covered past papers. So there you can get some access to some of the papers. A lot of time MCQs come up and definitely they're very scoring. You can easily secure 1, 2 or even up to 5 marks MCQs have come for a section like biopsychology. There's nothing much in the way of how to answer an MCQ because you just have to shade the box. So we can do that, but to effectively teach you how to go about answering. I know some of you at the first glance you'll get the correct answer. You can just mark it and go ahead, which is the ideal situation. But for the rest of you, it's going to be if you don't know the right answer, how to rule out the wrong options which are given and then come to, okay, this must be the right answer. That is what I'll demonstrate right now. So the first question here is, which statement about the cognitive interview is not true? Many students, as obvious as it might sound, are just going to be in a rush because they think, oh, I have to complete in 30 minutes, and they've gone into panic. They're not going to read the word not. And lots of them are going to mark a statement which is true. And then, because they don't even read all the statements, they won't even realize, oh, multiple statements are true. Later, they'll regret that I knew that this one's not true, but still I marked it because I didn't read the question properly. So the first tip into answering the MCQ correctly is, do not answer it in a panic. Even if you take that, few seconds literally to read the whole question patiently, it's not going to like waste your time or take too much of your time. And better than making a mistake and losing a mark unnecessarily. So give the time it takes to read the question and then answer it. Here they're asking us which statement is not true. Deliberately they word it in that way because it becomes a little challenging. As I told you, we'll go statement by statement just to show you how to think about possibly wrong statements when you're not 100% confident of the answer. The first statement is, the cognitive interview includes leading questions. If you think about, does the cognitive interview include leading questions? It does not. So definitely this statement is not true. If you've not come across per se like cognitive interview under that any mention of leading questions, this is not something you need to memorize in any case. You know what leading questions are. You've seen the Loftus and Palmer study on leading questions. So you can think of it that way. Like, use your reasoning when you don't remember it through rote learning or memorization. When it comes to the Loftus and Palmer study, they had asked leading meaning suggestive questions to their participants. They like actually suggested what the answer is within the question itself, and that resulted in participants making many errors in answering. The purpose of cognitive interview is to get detailed and accurate answers from eyewitnesses. So of course leading questions would not be asked, like straightforward reasoning. Why would they mislead participants into answering something when they want accurate answers? So definitely, and Loftus and Palmer was one of those studies which in fact resulted in the development of cognitive interview, because it showed that how interviews are conducted with wrong practices like asking leading questions. So definitely leading questions are not going to be a part of cognitive interview. They've asked us which statement is not true. Here they're saying they do include leading questions, so that's not true. So here only we come to know our right answer is the first alternative. But like I told you, either to be doubly sure or to like rule out other possibilities because maybe you're not confident about the first one, let's quickly go through the other alternatives also, and let's see why they don't qualify as not being not true. The cognitive interview increases the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. Does it increase the accuracy? Yes, because compared to standard police interview, all the four techniques which are used under cognitive interview, they help participants to jog their memory, prevent them from using schemas, and that is why they end up giving accurate, factual answers. So this is a true statement, cannot qualify as not true. So definitely this is not an alternative that we are going to mark. Next is, cognitive interview is more time consuming than a standard interview. Yes, it is a limitation of the interview, but it is indeed time consuming because four techniques are used which require detailed investigation of the eyewitness's memory. It ends up taking a lot of time. So again, it's a true statement. We cannot mark it as not true. Finally, the cognitive interview requires highly trained interviews. Yes, again, a practical limitation like the previous one. But cognitive interview is something that cannot be done by any interviewer at all. A certain body language is required, certain care not to ask certain type of questions, an empathetic tone, connecting with the eyewitnesses. All this is something that can be done only by a highly trained interviewer. So again, a true statement does not qualify as not true. So definitely that one answer which is not true is the first one, A. In the paper, you just have to shade the box with your pen. So that's an easy 1 mark to secure. Let's look at the next question. Outline the procedure of a study, it should be, that investigated the duration of long-term memory. Okay, here the most common mistake made by students is again to read in a haste and to just read outline, study, long-term memory. What you end up missing when you read like this, very specifically they have asked duration of long-term memory. So if you give a study that has investigated the capacity of long-term memory or encoding in long-term memory, you'll get 0 marks because they want specifically a duration based study. I know mostly, I think for capacity, you all don't learn any studies of long term memory. Most students don't, so you won't give that. But many students will end up giving some semantic type of study, like the Badley study, in which participants either had to remember words that were acoustically similar or dissimilar and semantically similar or dissimilar. They end up giving that study and then they wonder why they didn't get marks. Because it was about semantic encoding in LTM, it was not about duration. The most popular study for duration in long-term memory is the Baharek study. A very good study, the classic one. I would suggest you give that. So first thing you need to be careful about is to give a study based on duration. Secondly, outline the procedure. This is one more thing that students are going to miss. Because they are in a haste, what they're going to do is study, duration, long-term memory. Okay. So now I'm going to give aim, procedure, results, conclusion because that is how I've been taught to learn. And even in the textbook, case studies are given in that format. They've specifically asked you for the procedure, not for aims, results, or conclusion, which means that you have to give only the procedure of the study. For any other thing that you give, like the aim or results, you're not going to get any credit. So it's going to be a waste of your time and you lose that much marks because you must be compromising on the procedure for that much to give those points. Procedure of a study is always about how. If you're not able to directly recall the procedure of a study and they've asked you a question like this, just think how did Barrick et al. Do their study? More specifically, and in fact, some students ask me, do we have to give the exact number of participants? Do we have to give their nationality? Do we have to say where the study was done? See, undoubtedly, you can give those things, but for a 3 marker, when it comes to procedure specific 3 marker, of course, you should give the main points of the procedure, those which contribute most to understanding duration of LT. This study is not very culture specific as such. So specifying the nationality or ethnicity of participants is not highly relevant. So the next thing students will ask me, then how do we know what is relevant? For any study, the rule is when it comes to the procedure, what is going to be most important or most relevant is what is the task that was done in the study? What did the participants have to do, or sometimes what did the researcher do to assess something in the participants? Generally, when it's an experimental study like Barrick, it's the participants who will have to do something. So, what is their task? If it is a self-report type of study, there will be the researcher who's administering some questionnaire or something. So, what did the researcher administer? Task is very important unless it is something to do specifically with culture, like say obedience in collectivist cultures. Then, what nationality participants are coming on from and all, not very relevant to be put in a 3 marker, which is a very focused question. That would work better in an essay type of question, like a 20 marker in your case. So, task is very important. Measurement is very important. What I mean by measurement is specifying what the dependent variable was, again because this is an experiment, and how it was measured. Another way of thinking about is what was the researcher assessing or looking out for in the task that participants did. Remaining whatever is there in terms of, like I said, number of participants, where they were coming from, what was the sampling technique, those can be considered as secondary details in the procedure, not relevant to a focused answer for 3 marks. 3 points, you have to give at least 3 unique points for 3 marks. One more thing, general coming to my mind, many people assume, many students assume 3 points means any 3 points do, for 3 marks. So they would end up giving something like the same point, iterated in a different wording for a second mark. That doesn't count. For example, if I say Barrick tested the long-term memory of participants by asking them to do free recall. Then in the next sentence I say, he asked them to remember, not in any particular order, the names of their classmates. So in the first point I'm talking about free recall. In the second point, I'm just explaining what is free recall. These are not two unique points. This is the same thing. In both, I'm talking about free recall in different words. In one, I'm elaborating less. I'm using the term directly. In the other one, I'm elaborating more. Doesn't count as two unique points. Both are about free recall. So one mark for both the points together, because in a sense they are 1 point. For another mark, I would have to give another point. So say for example, then I can talk about the cued recall. That would count as a separate point. That is why making your essay plans, making your frames, answer writing frames for your AO1 and all is very important, because there you make sure that for every study, every theory, you have your unique points listed out. Of course, and then elaboration is separate, so you don't confuse the two. That is something I could discuss in a future video. Let's consider which could be the possible 3 points. When it comes to the task of the Barrick study, it was getting participants to remember who their classmates were from their high school. And these were participants who were like a wide age range. Some of them had just completed graduation from high school. Some had completed their graduation like 50 years back. So a wide range of participants was taken, and then they were asked to recall the names of their classmates at that time. Here, the age range of participants could be relevant. Like I said, anything about participants that's relevant to the question you could give. So you could specify something like there were even 74 years and above participants, and even those who were in their early 20s. Because it shows how duration is being tested from very recent recall to very early recall. So yes, but what I would suggest you focus on is first specify they had to remember their classmates from high school. Okay, also one more thing, there is this study of Barrick also on Spanish vocabulary. That one is also very famous. I'm taking this one. Like when I mentioned Barrick, I meant the classmate study, because I think most of you will do that. And in the Oxford AQA official textbook also, this is the one which is there. But definitely you could take the Spanish vocabulary study also, that is also as good, and it is about duration of LTM, it will count. There is no rule like you have to take the one which is in the textbook. As long as it's relevant to the question asked, you could take that one. Okay, so they had to remember their classmates' names from high school, and the gap from when they had completed high school to when they were being asked to recall could range from anything from like 1 year to even 50 years later. Here you can see I've just made a sub bullet point because these both are referring to the same thing. So just to show to you that this won't count as 2 points, because it's still about remembering classmates' names. It's counting in the same point. That's why I always insist, you'll see in my previous videos also, don't count the sentences. Count how many points you're giving. So it's the same point in 2 sentences, still counts as one. A unique point would be, like I told you, the task has to be specified. So this is the task broadly, that they had to remember their classmate's name. Now specifically how they had to do it would be a different point. Free recall, which meant that they would just have to spontaneously remember the names. You could say no, in no particular order, without any hints, without any cues. You could explain it that way. Or they had to do recognition, in which they were given their old yearbooks and they had to match the faces and names of their classmates. So we could say old yearbooks, matching names and faces. Or they had to do cued recall, which is they were given, for example, first letters of their classmates' names. That was a cue. And from that letter, like a prompt, they had to identify the name of the participant. As I told you earlier, I'm not writing the full answers. If you want to learn how to write full paragraph format answers, you can see in the previous video. I'm writing in bullet points just for a quick memo to give you like what to write. I will upload a PDF of this document on my website also, and I'll link it below in the description box and pin comment. But don't write like this in the paper. This is not the way you write in bullet points. So prompting with first letters of classmates' names. Next thing is, so I have given the a broad task, like what participants had to do. They had to remember the names. Then I have given specific measures, like how they were being made to remember the names. Then like I told you, the next thing is measurement. What is the researcher looking out for, or what is he trying to assess over here? The retention of classmates' name over time. Like, does it decline with age or does it remain constant? That is what he's looking out for. Like long-term memory duration, how much is it? Does it wither away with time or not? So how we can put it is, long-term memory retention was assessed across different time periods from a few months to a few decades. Here, one grave mistake which students make is they start giving the result. So those who were older, even they did well on cued and matched recall, and those who were younger as well as the older people. So there wasn't much difference. But when it came to free recall, there was a lot of difference. That becomes result, like I said earlier. It's not what they were assessing. So it's not a part of the procedure. Whenever you say this was found, this is what the finding of the study was. It becomes about result, and they've specifically asked you procedure. They've not asked you for a result. So don't make that mistake. Write it in terms of what they were assessing or what they were looking out for, not what they assessed. That you don't have to give. Okay, so that is what you can cover in Bahrik. I would say these are the main points. You could have a different perspective of what is more important. Like I mentioned earlier, you might feel the age of participants is more important. If you give their age range, like say early 20s to 74 plus years, I think that is what it was. It is another way of conveying what I have written here. So that's fine. You might feel like I told you, specifying how many of them were there or where the study was conducted was important, but trust me, that will count as secondary details. This is so important, like, because this is showing about the duration of long-term memory, what I've written, that you're going to get most marks for this. You might be credited 1 or 2 marks for giving some secondary information. When you want the full 3 marks, this is what you definitely have to mention along with that, or just like this, how I've written. Now, one thing I want you to notice in this question paper is the next 2 questions are more or less linked to this one. Why I'm saying more or less is, like they've said, give one strength of research into long-term memory. They're not telling you to, you have to only give from Barrick study because you've taken that under duration. Or again, they've not even mentioned the word duration here. So as such, if there's some other study, like previously I had given the example Badley study on semantically and acoustically similar and dissimilar words, you could take that also. They're okay because they're just saying strength of research into long-term memory. But essentially, like honestly, if you think, what comes to your mind when you see this question after writing the previous one? That you should give a strength from there or a weakness from there. Just becomes easier. You're already in the flow of writing Barrick, so evaluating it becomes easier. What I want you to notice is sometimes the questions are pretty continuous. Like even if we take something else, but it's still from long-term memory only. It's not from a different topic that they're giving the question. So some students have the tendency, oh, this section is difficult. Let me skip it. I'm not comfortable with long-term. I find the short-term memory studies much easier. I find Sperling and sensory register studies much easier. Or overall, I don't like the multi-store model. Let me do working memory. Although they'll be reverse. Most students would leave working memory and like to do MSM. The fact is that when it comes to psychology A levels, you cannot skip any topic. Because if you have skipped long-term memory or MSM by any chance, you're losing 3 plus 3 plus 3, 9 marks in the paper, which you can't afford to lose. So anyone who has that inclination, maybe because I'm not sure, but in some of your other subjects, you could leave out a few topics. Don't do that when it comes to psychology. Okay, I would like to take the strength from Barrick study. Even if you're taking the Spanish vocabulary study, this one will apply. Even if you're taking the encoding study, which is the Badley study, then also the points will be similar to this one. Like, because I'm going to give in a strength, ecological validity. So yes, it won't be exactly similar. Badly studies were not ecologically valid, but you could take it as a weakness. So in the next one, limitation, you could take ecological validity as a weakness. In the weakness for Barrick, I would take possible confounding variables. So for the badly study, because it's like a proper lab experiment, you could take it as a strength that there were no confounding variables. So I know you can't take exactly the same strength in imitation, but you could just reverse it, or you could think on similar lines for writing the points. One question that frequently comes up is, if it is a 3 marks question on a strength or weakness, do I need to write in Peel format like I write for my essays? Not really, but effectively it does become that. So I would say yes. See, when it comes to your 20 marker in your case, or 12 marker, there's this proper rubric which talks about evaluation needs to be very detailed and that way, and very effective, clear. In Oxford AQA, there's a tendency to give a rubric for every answer. So even for the 3 markers, we have our rubrics to mark. Only thing is the differences in that rubric, they don't insist that much on, thoroughness, effectiveness, but it is implied. It is still there. Why to learn separately? Like if I have to write for a 3 mark, I'll write the evaluation point this way for Barring. But if I was writing in a 20 mark, I would write it that way. Why complicate things? Just keep it simple. Anyways, you've made an outline, supposing for Barrick or LTM, for 20 mark, and you've already prepared your Peel outlines in that. So why not pick up one of that only and put in the 3 marker? Like I told you, effectively or practically it comes to the same thing. It's for 3 marks. You might feel my Peel point is very detailed, like justifying 4 or 5 mark. Still write it for the 3 marker. When you write, it goes in a flow. It's not like you're going to save 5 minutes or 10 minutes if you don't write the Peel format and you skip 1 or 2 sentences in that. So it doesn't make sense that you should try to condense it. Follow that format. I will show you in that format only how to write. When it comes to strength of Barrick study, as I've already mentioned, the procedure was very realistic. I would start my point from there. Now I will specify in the Barrick study. Why? They have asked me one strength of research into long-term memory. Did they tell me to take Barrick? Then how does the examiner know that I'm talking about the Barrick study? So I must mention one more thing. When they say strength of research in your AQA and Oxford AQA paper, many students make this mistake. They believe research means research study. I have to give a strength or weakness from a study specifically. In AQA, research means either theory or study. So even for example, let's say you want to give a strength like overall, not specific to any study, but long-term memory has been bifurcated further by, like say, Tulving, and he has shown the complexity of long-term memory by showing it's like can be semantic, procedural, episodic. You can take that also. So you can take a strength of the theory overall rather than a study. That is why also it becomes important to emphasize that you're taking this study and this is what you're evaluating, because there are so many possibilities of what you could be evaluating in this question. Just make it clear to the examiner right at the beginning, signpost it and show it to the examiner that this is the one which I have selected. To elaborate, to give context, or to answer the question how was it realistic, what we can say is the assessment which was there, like looking at yearbooks and identifying names of classmates, it's a very realistic thing. Many times in our life, for nostalgia or to remember past good times, we do look at albums, we do try to remember like who we were with, where we were, right? So it's something we do in everyday life. Maybe not regularly, but it's not something alien. It's not an artificial task which we've never done before or we've never heard of it. Specific to the laboratory only they do such things. It was not of that time. So I could say tasks like looking at yearbooks, albums, to remember faces, names of people are done in everyday life, or you could say in real life. Like I said, not literally every day, but it is a part of everyday life as such. Most common mistake, not only here, anytime writing evaluation points, is not to give concrete examples, to just say it's realistic and leave it at that, not explaining any further what exactly is realistic. That doesn't score you well. Like even in a 3 marker, it can bring you down to 2 or 1 mark. So make sure you're giving context to what you're saying. If you want to learn more about Peel format writing, how to effectively write your evaluation points and all, there are videos on my channel before. So do check some of the previous videos, especially those which are on 16 markers. In that, I've really emphasized on these things. I know in your syllabus you don't get 16 markers, but it is as relevant to you. Now to explain why is this a strength. Okay, so I've said that it is realistic. I've given an example, but in the beginning I said it is a strength. Sorry, I'll just put that. And anyways, in the question they've asked that it's a strength. So now the question is, why is it a strength? I need to explain that. So what I can say is the duration of LTM. That is what the study was about. It has relevance to everyday life. Whatever duration they found in Barrick's study, it does apply to everyday long-term memory of individuals. And what evaluation criterion is met in terms of strength when a study is realistic? Ecological validity. So we can just end off with that. Therefore, the study, or rather to take the wording from the question and to link it back to the question, research into LTM has ecological validity. So do write it this way, even though it is for 3 marks. Why to put your marks at risk by trying to compromise on 1-2 sentences and save 2-3 seconds? That's not going to be helpful. Next is explain one limitation of research into long-term memory. Same thing, you can give it from anywhere in long-term memory, any theory or study. I'm just taking Barrick because we've already taken that. Confounding was possible in the study. There was no control over all possible extraneous variables. So procedure was not controlled. In Barrick, again I will mention study, which is a weakness, a limitation. Again, to give context, what was not controlled about it? The participants who were taken, it was not analyzed whether they've already been rehearsing their classmates' names, or are they very friendly already with their classmates? Like, have they kept good touch with their classmates? Are they already mingling with a lot of them even after school is over? Are there some of them who are like isolated and have stopped interacting with their classmates, or have made new friends? So now they don't interact with previous classmates anymore. So the degree to which they must be exposed to or interacting with their classmates is something, or thinking about them, is something that was not controlled on the study, and a very serious possible confounding variable, because that would really influence whether they were able to remember names or not. That would be counted as a participant variable. Also, I was mentioning this in one of the previous videos also. Many students assume good terminology is only for AO1. It's equally applicable to AO3 as well. So make sure that you use terms like control, ecological validity, participant variables and all. Use good terms to explain your answers. Again, for the smaller questions, they might not give it that much value, though Oxford is based a lot on rubrics. But it's just good practice, puts you in the habit of writing that way, so in your essays you can really score with that habit. So participant variable of exposure or interaction with classmates after completion of high school was not controlled for. So they did not try to like exclude any participants. They didn't have any exclusionary criteria, or they did not even try to investigate if this possibility was there. Because of that, what happens is, like, again, to explain why it is a limitation, The exposure or interaction would become a reason for the DV, which is for duration of LTM, rather than the IV, which they are considering. How many years have passed since they have left high school? So, exposure or interaction could become the reason for accuracy of recall from LTM rather than a number of years since graduation. And this reduces the validity of results. Whenever there is any confounding, then that reduces internal validity. We could just say validity. Now, very quickly, just to brainstorm, because many students prefer to take the Baddeley study. That is what I've come to know from my students. The acoustically similar, dissimilar, and semantically similar, dissimilar study. So, what could be the strength and weakness for that one? Like I said, the strength could be it was very controlled. In that study, they had made sure the word length. Length of words which was given to participants on each list, because after all they had 4 different lists. So the length of the words, the length of the list itself, like how many words were there on the list, the rate of reading out the words to the participants, the duration which was given for recall, that is a few seconds for short term memory, and more importantly right now we're focused on long term memory, so 30 minutes before taking up a long term memory test. These things were highly standardized, very precisely measured using timers and all. So that gave like great control to their study. They had great control over the procedure, so there was no confounding, which increases internal validity. In terms of weakness, ecological validity was lacking. It was unrealistic. They just had lists of words, whereas in real life, in fact, we can take an example from Barrett. Long term memory would not be about remembering a list of words, rather, it would be about remembering names of people, like names of classmates or faces of people, like classmates. So, it does not have relevance to everyday life. Okay. Now, ideally, at this point, we have covered 10 marks, so you should have completed this in 10 minutes if you are doing the paper actually. Let's come to the 20 marker question, for which definitely minimum we should reserve 20 minutes to understand the question properly, write it, and then review it. Like I told you, when it comes to Oxford AQA, unfortunately, many students are not well versed with many aspects of the paper, including what is the breakup in terms of assessment objectives of different questions. See, if it's a 20 marker and it's like you can clearly see a stem even before we read the stem of the scenario, it's definitely going to be assessing all 3 objectives, AO1, AO2, and AO3, right? Now, what is the breakup? For AO1, it is 8 marks. Regardless of a stem is there or it is not there, AO1 is going to be worth 8 marks in a 20 marker. So be sure of that. In the specimen paper which was released for Oxford AQA, they've made a mistake. In that AO2, they've taken for 2 marks. Like I told you, they made a mistake. AO2 is always worth 4 marks when it comes to a scenario based 20 marker. Okay, where the marks get reduced, or where they take the marks from to allot 4 marks to AO2 is from AO3. So AO1 does not get compromised in a 20 marker without a scenario. AO1 is 8 marks, AO3 is 12 marks. Here we are drawing marks from the AO3, we are removing 4 marks from this, so AO3 comes down to 8 marks. So this is the breakup. AO1 8 marks, AO2 4 marks, AO3 8 marks for this type of question. Means a 20 marker with the stem. Now, how to answer these type of questions? 2 key things are there. 1, read the scenario very carefully, very patiently. Don't go into panic. This is the time when students will go into even greater panic than they would for previous questions. Because, oh my god, 20 markers. Some of them have less than 20 minutes left. How am I going to do it? Does not help. See, even if you're running out of time or whatever it is, Being hasty is just going to end you up writing a wrong answer. So how is it helpful in any way? Better take out the time, let some more time go, read carefully. There's a stronger chance you'll be able to write effectively and complete. Once you've understood the question well, you can pick up on writing speed. But if in a haste you see the question only wrong and then you write, where are you going to get the time to correct the answer all over? And is it worth that effort? Okay, so take your time to read carefully. That is key. Second thing is, like many students will ask me, there's so much of working memory. How will I cover everything for AO1? So read the scenario first. Make an outline. They give you a space also, box to make an outline. Make it there if you want, or mentally make it. Think about which points of working memory model are relevant in AO2 in this scenario. Then those points only you can explain in AO1 in depth. See, frankly speaking, when it comes to your curriculum, they've given a lot of marks for the essay question, 20 marks instead of 16, which is then the UK curriculum. So even if for AO1 you describe the full working memory model and not selectively what is given in the situation, even that is fine because you have 8 marks to justify. So it works well. But if you are wanting to take that approach that let me take a few elements of working memory and really elaborate on them instead of like outlining the whole theory, then just see which aspects are relevant to the situation given from working memory and take those for elaboration in AO1. Okay, having said that, other elements we'll see further. Let's read the question first. I can't tell you, okay, sorry, before reading, because I just saw the first line. I can't tell you how many times the same type of question has come in Oxford AQ. That is one thing I've noticed. Practical tip you can think it of as when it comes to the UK AQA curriculum, questions tend to be very different from year to year. In Oxford, the name of the character will change, but it will always be about something. If you're going to ask about working memory, some sort of dual task is going to take place. One of the dual tasks will make it difficult to perform the task, the other one will make it easy to do both tasks simultaneously. That's why one strategy, like which works very well in Oxford, given the practicality of the paper so far, like they've not declared it officially, but it really works, is to practice past papers. The questions are so repetitive in nature. It won't be exactly the same, but similar situation. And when you see it, you'll understand how similar it is. But you can really prepare for, the long answers. Like very quickly, I'll give an example. Here, WMM always some dual task is there and some interference is taking place in like recently because I was checking so many papers of my students again and again that in development that Vygotsky question, some sort of scaffolding is required, or if it has to be the Piaget question, then some sort of discovery learning is taking place in the classroom. The wording is also the same, trust me. So very good strategy, especially for the essay ones. Like short-term questions, still I've seen some varieties there, the short markers. The long questions, 12 marks, are so repetitive. Like this time they've put this for 20, similar situation, they put it for 12 marks in the next year. Practice will really help. Like once you practice well, you get feedback from the teacher, you can finalize that answer and you can be ready. Okay, I'll just have to change the character names a little. One or two tasks given here and there might be different. All those situations not very detailed. So I'll be able to write the same answer next time also. So definitely for the essay questions, my very big advice for Oxford paper is do the past papers and be ready for similar questions to be asked and really make you score very well. So past paper practice for this syllabus in particular is very effective for the long answers. Okay. Kai is in his room drawing and listening to music. His mum comes in and asks him about his day. Kai is not able to listen to the music and talk to his mum at the same time. I don't know why the word album has come. However, he is able to carry drawing while he talks to his mum. Describe and evaluate the working memory model. Refer to Kai's behavior in your answer. Many times students ask me this also, they give that box for outlining. What am I supposed to outline? First, my recommendation, outline AO2. That gives you a clue what to cover for AO1 also. Drawing and listening to music. Working memory. Drawing, which component of working memory will be engaged? VSS, right? Listening to music, which component of WMM will be engaged? PL. So VSS, PL. Whole day in his room, he keeps on doing this. There's no issue. But then his mom comes, asks him about his day. He's answering that. He's talking to his mom. So he's listening what she's asking him, then he's answering that. Which component is getting engaged? PL. Okay, so first you identify all the components. So VSS, PL, these are getting engaged in the situation whenever two tasks are requiring the same component, PL, which is in the case of he's talking to his mom and he's listening to music. He's not able to do it because PL is getting overloaded. But whenever two separate components are being used, VSS and PL, like when he's drawing and listening to music or when he's drawing and talking to his mom, he's able to do it. So what is relevant to AO2? Explaining, like I said, which components are being used, how they are clashing or not clashing, right? Now, like I told you, if you want to take a very focused approach for AO1, though it's not required, but if that is your style, it's a good style. Then you can emphasize more on PSS and VSS and PL and dual task performance in working memory. Central executive also comes in inevitably because that is the one which sees to it that multitasking is possible. So you could give those points. So once you've identified your AO2 like we did, then it becomes clear to you what you need to cover in AO1 as well. So this is one way of going about it. Then comes to it for AO3. How should we plan out? See, when it comes to a 20 marker and where AO3 is worth 12 marks, what do? I'll just go over that quickly. That can be important. It's very easy to score if you understand this. So I'll just explain this thing to you. When it comes to a 20 marker, if it is AO3 part, you're going to give 4 points. Right? And as per the rubric, like see, effectively it comes to 3 marks only per evaluation point, which we were seeing in the short answers also. If you go by the rubric, the emphasis is more on effectiveness and clarity, which is another way of saying context and reasoning. So in a 20 marker, where AO3 is 12 marks without the STEM, you give 4 points. You make sure one is a study. I hope you have been following this format, right? So one should be an empirical study support for the model given. One you give as a point and counterpoint. So any like strength, but then this is the weakness also. And then any 2 more points you give, which can be from issues and debates also or approaches also. So in total, you give 4 points and you justify 12 marks. Now, if it is coming down to 8 marks, which is an odd figure, I would strongly recommend you give 3 points. Okay, so not only for this particular question, but I'm recommending it for any 20 marker which is coming with the STEM and EO3 is getting reduced to 8 marks. You give 3 points, peel points, like fully developed points for your EO3. In that, do keep one of a study. Always see you want to get full marks. I'm not saying you can't get good marks without giving a study, but full marks, I want 20 out of 20, which should be your aim. You must give a supporting study. So, one, make it a study. Two, make it a point and counterpoint of some sort, depending on the topic. So, we'll come to that. And third, give any one general evaluation point as simple as real life application or any such point you can give. Do try to balance between strengths and weaknesses. See, when you give counterpoints, in a sense, you do end up, like effectively giving both strengths and weaknesses. But because you're not giving counterpoints everywhere, I don't think anyone's able to give counterpoints for all the points becomes too long. In that case, overall, just balance. When you look at your final 3 evaluation points, just make sure at least one strength, at least one weakness is there in them. It should not be all strengths, all weaknesses. Again, you can get good marks that way because your points are well developed. But to get that absolute 20, the full marks, that might not be helpful. Okay, this is my recommendation. It will become more clear to you as we go about. And right now, I'm not even listing the AO3 points that I'm going to cover specifically for this one. I'll do it as we get along in the question. Okay. My approach is to summarize the entire working memory model for AO1, not just VSS and PL, even though that is relevant to AO2, because I feel to justify 8 marks of AO1 and to aim for that full 20. They have said describe the working memory model, right? So I would like to describe all of it, not just what is in the situation, but nothing wrong with taking the other approach also. That's why I mentioned how to do that in the beginning. Working memory model, whenever we talk about it, similar to the MSM, we must begin by who gave the model, Baddeley and Hitch. Some students write only Baddeley, please write Baddeley and Hitch. Then the rationale for developing the model. They did not agree with the STM being a passive storehouse as it was outlined in the MSM. They wanted to show its workbench capacity and its further bifurcation into subcomponents. So they were basically opposing the MSM conceptualization of STM, and they were trying to show its working potential and its further subcomponents. So then how they conceptualize it, that becomes the next thing. So what were the subcomponents which they gave? We just have to explain each. They began with the central executive. Again, just to remind you, I'm just speaking a quick outline, otherwise the video will become too long. Do write in full paragraph, write full names of all the acronyms you're using before using those abbreviations. Okay, so write very properly in very formal way. So the first component is the central executive, which is like the master controller, literally the CEO of the working memory paradigm. Its work is to allot resources to the slave systems, to strategize like which information, like monitoring from the sensory register, which information should go into VSS and which should go into PL. It does not have any storage of its own, so it uses EB as its like virtual storage. Then, of course, we will explain EB later. We can just mention it first, like episodic buffer. The Visual Spatial Sketchpad is it's one of the slave systems which is responsible for processing visual and spatial information. So it is further bifurcated into two components. First is the visual cache, which is responsible for visual information, processing visual information like color, shape, form, texture, etc., brightness, luminosity. Then there is the inner scribe, which is helpful in processing spatial information like position, orientation, location of objects. I know it seems to be a lot, and when you write in full essay form, it does take up a lot of time and space. But you have to justify 8 marks, which is a lot of marks. And yes, psychology paper at A levels, no matter which board it is such that you have to be quick in writing, you have to write a lot with good terminology. Where students lose marks here in EO1 is not to use good terms, to forget some subcomponent of VSS, to forget some subcomponent of PL. See, like I told you, especially if you practice the past papers, these questions are so repetitive. And overall, you just have these few theories to learn. You're fortunate you have unit wise exams, you don't have to give the full linear together. Why not be fully prepared? Like rather than just reading the book and going into the exam, why not have your full outline made, essay outline made, which you're revising properly and going into the exam, right? So these type of smaller mistakes should not be there, losing marks because of not remembering good terms, names of subcomponents on. Make sure you're well versed with that. Phonological loop processes auditory information. Yes, you can give things like brain areas which have been identified corresponding to PL, temporal lobe, visuospatial sketchpad, occipital lobe. I'm not including that much detail also. I'm just focusing on the model. And you could also take those points, localization and all, for EO3, because that becomes like neurological evidence for existence of subcomponents of WMM. So in fact, I would suggest take it there if you want to take that. It is also divided into two further subcomponents. One is the phonological store, which holds auditory information for a few seconds. It's literally a passive store for the sounds that are coming in, so just holds them. And then, of course, there is the articulatory process or articulatory loop, which keeps on refreshing the information which is in the store every 1 or 2 seconds. Also, coming to the episodic buffer now, it is that component which we have already mentioned, so I'm not repeating, is a store for the CE. It helps to create episodes or full events of comprehensive, coherent information by combining what is in the VSS and PL. Because after all, when we remember things, we don't remember the sound and the vision separately. We remember as a complete episode. So by combining from VSS, PL, and also it integrates what is in the LTM along with what is in these subcomponents to create coherent episodes. You can mention this component was added later, but again, I would say, take it as an AO3 point if you want to take it, because it just shows the flexibility of Badley and Hitch, their openness to incorporating new information and revising their model. You can even link it to, okay, no, I think yours is unit curriculum, you might not know, but some of the students do that. I think mostly it's my repeater students who do that. They've already learned about psychology as a science and also then they apply that and show revision flexibility of the model. Anyways, let's just drop that. What's the structure of AO1 here? Defining working memory model, explaining why it was given, and then just explaining all the subcomponents. That's way enough to score 8 marks, and definitely that is the critical information that is of the working memory model. Anything else, brain systems and all, like I told you, that will become secondary. So better taken in AO3. This would be my 8 marker part for working memory model. And if I, practice this here for this particular paper, which is Jan 25, which I'm doing right now, very likely that this is going to come for a 12 marker or a 9 marker in future papers. So it's set one practice, and I've really grasped it in a way that I'm going to score another, 8 or 6 marks in future papers. So really worth doing the effort of jotting down, actually writing full paragraphs or essays in your case, not just making the bullet points. Now applying it to Kai's situation. Grave mistake when it comes to AO2 is not using terminology again, assuming that terminology is only for AO1. That's not the case. Even when you're explaining Kai's situation, use good terms like PL, VSS, CE and all to apply to his situation. Okay, so when it comes to Kai, and also think of it as justifying every sentence that is given in the situation, in the sense that they've mentioned something about Kai is drawing and listening to music. So before coming to the main conflict where mother is talking and he's not able to listen to music, explain this part also. What is happening here? So in your mind, think of it as what's happening in the first sentence I'm explaining in terms of WMM. Okay, then what's happening in next sentence that I'm explaining in terms of WMM. So make sure you cover every aspect of the situation given, because after all it's AO2 for 4 marks. You need to justify that 4 marks. Also, make use of wording from the situation. I can't emphasize enough. Again, recently when I was checking the papers, just so many generic points are there. So things like, Kai is making use of phonological loop. That's it. For what is he making use of phonological loop? Or when Kai is listening, he's using phonological loop. Listening to what? See, when they've given you things in the situation so clearly, listening to music, why not use that wording in answering? When Kai is listening to music the whole day, he's making use of his phonological loop. Like, why can't you write it like that? So make sure to make very explicit links to what is given in the situation. If some students literally they're going to write like this. In the situation, phonological loop, VSS, both are being used. As long as both separate components are being used, dual tasks can be performed. But when the same subcomponent is being used for multiple tasks, they become difficult to perform. No name of the character. They don't even mention Kai. They don't even mention his mum when they are discussing. No mention of the task that Kai was doing, where phonological loop was being used, where VSS was being used. See, if they just wanted to know about your general knowledge of dual task performance or VSS and PL and all, then they would have asked you a direct question for AO1. Why have they bothered to give you the full stem, full situation and all? So yes, you should refer to Kai, to the task being done, use that exact wording which is given the situation while explaining, not to copy paste that in your answer. Use the because type of statements. Like recently, I was just reading in one of the, books. I'm sorry, I'm not able to credit right now. So much reading, I get confused what I've read where. But use a lot of because statements in AO2. So throughout, think like when you're practicing for AO2 for your papers, like at the preparation stage, only okay, I'm talking about AO2, I'm talking about Kai. Kai is using phonological loop because he's listening to music. So when you keep on remembering that because, it helps you to link to the situation. You could use that strategy if it's becoming difficult for you to link. Okay, so when Kai is, what is he doing? Listening to music and drawing. So when Kai is drawing, he's making use of VSS. Explain it when you write because it requires uh, visually presenting information and using spatial knowledge to draw. When he is listening to music, he's using his phonological loop because that's auditory information. So there are sounds and music coming into his ears. So it is the phonological loop which is processing that. So first you've explained the first part. Now next you explain he's able to do this smoothly because as we've already explained in AO1, that's the critical part. Central executive allocates resources to slave systems. So and it decides which information should go where. So there's no competition taking place in VSS and PL resources. Separate resources are being dedicated for separate tasks to these two storages, these two subcomponents. So we could say he's able to do both well. Keep the focus on Kai. Don't switch to generic statements. Kai is able to do both well because CE, his central executive, is allocating separate resources for separate sensory information to these two or separate subcomponents. Then comes his mother. Now, like I told you, keep thinking I have to explain everything which is given. So next I need to explain what happens when his mom comes. So when his mom comes and he starts talking to her, again he's making use of his PL. Now that creates competition. Here you can explain your competition for resources of his central executive. When you're writing, do explain that because auditory information is only being allocated to PL with limited resources which central executive is giving there. So there is going to be competition for those resources in doing two auditory tasks. However, next what they have mentioned is that Kai is able to draw when he's talking to his mom. So again, when mom is talking, that's using PL. And sorry, here it was. He's talking to his mom but not listening to music because that is also the PL. We need to point out that. But when he's drawing, that is VSS, not PL. So there's no competition for resources. We have already mentioned the central executive allocates separate resources to separate slave systems. So here there's no competition. So therefore he's able to do both together. Okay, so in AO2, I wanted to see especially how my focus is entirely on Kai and the situation. I don't stray from that at any point. I don't include any generic elements. That's how to get full marks here. Now coming to AO3, I will brainstorm on what possible points are there later, but first I would like to take those points which most students prefer. The most common ones for WMM, where they lose marks is like not knowing the points, but not developing them well. So I will put special emphasis on how to develop those points. They are simple, but how to develop them with context and reasoning to score high marks. Because even if you follow my formula or strategy, take one study point, this, that, and keep it to 3 points, you're not scoring unless you develop the points individually well. So that is what I'll focus on. Yeah, one thing is definitely the Oxford AQA textbook, a very brilliant textbook, I must say, but many times ends up not being either very clear on evaluation points. The points are there, but students can't locate where they are because it's all merged uh, along with AO1. That's a limitation of the book. Whereas if you look at the UK AQA books, especially the Flanagan books, be it Flanagan and Cardwell or any of the other books, separately only they look. In fact, even the Jean Mark Lawton book, though it's meant more for teachers than students, but they do separately give the AO3 and the AO1 points. So many times you do have to refer to external resources. I don't know how your teachers go about it. I have both types of students, those who school teachers strictly like stick to the textbook, they don't give outside points, and those whose teachers do refer to extra points, like they just give them the handouts, but of course they have taken those points from the UK textbooks. I would also strongly recommend you do, like for my students, definitely I do share it with them and do recommend. So I'll tell you also, have the Flanagan books, even though they are not catered to your curriculum, but they just, I would say, inevitable to have, because I personally, like frankly, don't appreciate the Oxford AQA textbook when it comes to the AO3 part. It's too overlapping with AO1, like what is written there. The way of writing, why I'm saying overlapping, because the way of writing is also, there's no clarity whether they're giving a strength or weakness point or how exactly it's serving as an evaluation point. Development is quite restricted in that, and it's just that because it's not conveniently separated into sections, that also becomes one problem in identifying exactly what to take in AO3. It can even be difficult to the extent to count how many evaluation points are given in one topic. So, keep the Flanagan books, any UK curriculum books with you for the AO3 at least. So, my whole point of saying this is, if you're finding it difficult to come up with AO3 points, perhaps this is the issue. I know many times for the initial topics like, memory, psychopathology, social influence, it's still good in the book. Later, when it comes to PS02 onwards, second paper onwards, so where you have biopsych and development and all, then students get very confused about AO3, especially in the developmental theories. So, there, at least, if not for everything which I recommend, do keep the Flanagan UK books with you. Okay, so I will give some points which you might not necessarily see in your textbook or not developed in the way I'm developing in your textbook. The reason for that is what I've just mentioned, that I might be taking up points from other books. And I hope you do the same. For the study point, like I said, always begin with one, empirical study. And that will serve as a strength. I would like to take the study by Badley himself, Hitch and Badley study, which was on the Central Executive Competition study. There's this other study also which is like very very popular, the F study, the capital letter F, which is rotating, and that shows competition between VSS and PL. Definitely, that's a very effective study that you can take. So in that study, participants had to look at a rotating capital letter F and follow its edges. Now that was a VSS task. At the same time, either they had to do another VSS task, which was, I think, not remembering very clearly, but like find the differences between two images or sorting two images visually or something like that. So either they were doing two VSS tasks together, or some of them were doing VSS plus phonological loop tasks. So when they were scanning the capital letter F in terms of phonological loop, they were also listening to different sounds and verbally, I think, classifying them into different types. Again, there are many variations of this study also. That's why I don't know which one you might have studied. That study went to show, like, no matter which variation you take of it, the VSS, if it is overloaded, like if participants have to do two VSS tasks together, they perform very poorly. But if they have to do VSS and a PL task, so two different slave systems, if they have to do simultaneously, they do it correctly. They are much more accurate and they take less time compared to if they have to do two VSS tasks. So that's a very good supporting study. Right now, the one I'm taking is a little different, like similar to that, but the components which are being investigated are different. So this was the study in which participants had to do one fixed CE task. Like if you draw parallel with the other study, in that they had to do a fixed VSS task, the capital letter F. Here they had to do fixed CE task, which was verifying logical statements. Again, I'm not writing that much, but this is that study in which participants are given a statement like B is not followed by the letter A, and then they are given a combination of letters like say A, B, and then they have to say whether that statement is true or false. This is that study. So it uses the central executive because it is reasoning based. Then they had to do along with that either like one of them had to do, one group had to do another CE task, which was speaking out random digits. So it's not easy to speak out random digits because you have to make sure that you don't repeat any digits, and they should not be following any serial order or any systematic thing. So it requires a lot of thinking or information processing. So it was using up their CE. Or they had to do another phonological loop task. Means the task which they're doing along with that fixed CE task used to be the phonological type, which was just articulatory suppression, repeating the again and again, the like that. As we would expect, what was found? What were the findings of the study? Those who did two CE tasks, they performed very slowly and they made a lot of mistakes. Those who did one CE plus one PL task, that means the second group, they were faster and they made very few errors. Going to show that indeed, okay, the conclusion, CE and PL are two separate components. Of working memory model. So the conceptualization is correct. Whenever you give an empirical study, which you should give in all your essays at least one, make sure to put in the aim procedure results format, conclusion, aim procedure results conclusion. So you can see I've done that. First, I mentioned the aim is to see separation of CEPL. Then what they had to do, again, focus on task and measurement. Measurement, not that explicitly I've not written because anyways here I'm putting the results. So in that accuracy and errors are being, accuracy and speed is being measured becomes very clear. But in the procedure, what tasks they had to do is the main thing. I'm not given things like number of participants, culture and all, not relevant. So procedure results and then what has been understood. Many students skip the conclusion part. So then very important element is lost. Like, okay, these are the results, but what is it telling us about working memory? That's the main question. That remains unanswered. So make sure always your format is aim procedure results conclusion. Now to explain why is this a strength, because it shows that the conceptualization of different subcomponents and the competition for resources both are correct. That is what this study is showing. Which of course any empirical study will increase the internal validity of the corresponding theory. Many students end off the point by saying that it increases the validity of the study. But the question is not about the study. The question is about the working memory model. So why don't you link back to that? Like, are you giving this study for its own sake? No, you're giving it to prove something, that the working memory model is accurate. So make sure you link back to that. That's why in Peel format that's called link, because you link back to the main question asked. I gave you another possible study, which was the VSS and PL competition study. Like that, I'm sure there are many, because Badley and Hitch have done so many, like countless studies, I think. Anyone that you can summarize effectively, like I have. Effectively means aim procedure results conclusion you can give correctly, make use of that study. Now for the point counterpoint evaluation, I would like to give again a very popular one with students, a strength of evidence. There is support from case studies also, like KF. In fact, KF study was an inspiration for Bagley and Hitch to develop their model, right? So I'm sure you all have learned about it and you'll remember the study. What was this study about? Again, in terms of aim, procedure, results, conclusion, here I'm not saying so much from a researcher's point of view, like they did this study to prove something. It was a naturally occurring case study in which they chanced upon some findings. So I'll just focus mainly, and anyways, it's a case study, so that much aim, procedure type of format is not followed. I'll focus on procedure and results. KF was found to be this person with memory issues. As far as I remember, it suffered from an accident, so brain impact was there. I think he fell off a bicycle or something very strongly. And after that, his short term memory or working memory started showing impairment. So, what they did in terms of procedure is they made him solve many tasks. Some were visual, some were verbal, and they all were like short term memory. So, they used to be brief duration type of tasks. Now, they were expecting at the time of the case study that he won't be able to do any type of short term tasks. Also, like quickly to give examples, many times they used to tell him to remember sounds or words like speech, etc. And sometimes just read letters and like sounds, words he had to hear. Sometimes he had to read letters or digits and remember. What they found is his visual memory was quite intact. He used to do well on the visual tasks, but he used to do very poorly on the verbal tasks. So that supports the fact that there must be a VSS for visual tasks and processing visual information, and PL for processing auditory information. Otherwise, how is it possible that his entire working memory is not affected? Only one subcomponent is affected. So definitely. Also, one more thing just to add to it, like in terms of findings, he also within auditory tasks he used to do better for sounds rather than speech. So sounds were easier for him to remember than words. Again, now explaining why this is a strength, because it shows that VSS and PL are separate subcomponents, and again it in terms of link it evidences the, it increases the validity of WMM. I'm taking it as a counterpoint of point, like I told you in the beginning. If you're not, you could to further make the point more effective, though not compulsory. You could say number of subsequent studies have supported. This is not only the case with Shawless and Warrington study of KF. It is also the case with patient SCLH. These patients also subsequently have shown similar patterns in working memory. For a counterpoint, I would definitely bring up the issue of case study evidence tends to be weak. When it comes to patients like KF, there is no baseline assessment. Like what is done is once they've suffered an accident, then only they are studied to see what impact it has had on their brain. And the assumption is that their brain would be working normally before the accident. That's why whatever abnormalities we are seeing now must be because of the accident, must be because working memory has got impacted. So not must be because the brain has got impacted. But to begin with, their brain functioning might not be normal. How do we know how KF's brain used to function before the accident? Which could mean, of course, we're not concerned with the brain here directly, but which could mean that his working memory might be unusual. It might not match that of normal people. See, reasoning is very important. For every point, keep on asking yourself why. Why is this a strength? Why is this a weakness? Okay, I've made this point. Baseline should have been done. Why it should have been done. Always answer the question why. That is what brings effectiveness and clarity. Like many times students show me the rubric and they say, what is this effectiveness and clarity which they want? Reasoning, why things are happening, explanations. That many students will write, we don't know how KF's brain was working before the accident, so the study is not generalizable or it's weak. Where's the reasoning? So what if we don't know how his brain was working before? Why it matters is because his working memory might be unusual, it might be different from other people. This is what brings clarity to your points. And then we can finish it off by saying, so this could not be effective evidence for supporting WMM. And if you have mentioned previously other studies like LH or which was the SC, many students do LH, you all might have not done. So you could apply the same point to them. Any of those case studies don't serve as good evidence because they all have the same running issue of baseline not being there. Of course, you could also put in the point that this is one single individual, so results might not generalize as long as you give reasoning for your points. Finally, for a limitation, I would bring up the very popular one that C conceptualization is not very correct. So you can see how I'm balancing my points: strength, then strength plus weakness because point and counterpoint, and now weakness. Also, I forgot to mention counterpoints need not be as developed as a full peel point, but reasoning has to be there, like you saw. So I didn't put the counterpoint in terms of peel, but it was thorough, it was effective. Okay, coming to limitation of working memory models, CL is not well conceptualized. Construct validity is poor. How I can elaborate on this is because it is not very different from what is called attention in MSN. In MSM, if you see, there is a process called attention, and it is a process, it's not a storage. It helps to transfer information from sensory register to short term memory. Now, in this model, central executive is being called as a memory system. It is not even a storage, it's having to use the storage of episodic buffer, and still it is being credited as a subcomponent of memory. So, how come? How is it different from attention? What is really classifying it as a memory subcomponent is not clear. Also, to this only, I was thinking we could add something else. There was this case. Yes, the case of EVR. I would add it in the same because it's about the same thing, central executive and clarity. EVR's case was that he did not have uh, problems in the whole of his central executive when he underwent an accident. So in EVR's case, in fact, not accident, he had a cerebral tumor. If we don't remember such details, it's okay. We can just say he had some brain issues. And because of that, his central executive functioning had declined. But surprisingly, what had happened was some central executive tasks, like not only central executive is associated with attention, over time it has been associated with problem solving, decision making, other cognitive processes. So again, why it's called memory is not clear. But anyway, some central executive tasks he could do well, like which required reasoning. He could do it. But some tasks he could not do well, which required decision making. For example, like if they told him what he would like to eat, where he would like to eat, he would take hours for such basic decisions to take. He was taking a lot of time. But reasoning tasks, say some syllogisms or basic tasks like odd one out or something, when they used to assess him on that, he used to do well. Now, why this is also about conceptualization of the CE is this has begged the question of should CE be conceptualized as having further subcomponents? In the sense that not only are VSS and PL subcomponents having their own subcomponents, maybe even the CE has it. So the working memory model actually needs to be more complex than it already is. So things like this have raised the question of whether the CE is well conceptualized or not. Again, to explain why this is a weakness, because as I just mentioned, WMM might be a limited conceptualization. In fact, at one point, it stops being parsimonious in the sense that it's just taking in everything, because CE is uh, described in such a broad way, like it's problem solving, also decision making, also attention, also. What is it exactly, and can we encompass everything into memory? So the whole question, the working memory model comes into question because of that. So it might be a limited conceptualization. Particularly, what is the issue? CE is ill defined. Like, you know, PL and VSS, at least it's very specific that visual and visual, spatial, and auditory information respectively. So exactly what they're doing is clear, but what is CE doing exactly? It's not clear. It's all over the place. That means it reduces the construct validity of the model. You could just say validity also, but more of like construct validity, because when the whole concept is into question, the definition of something is into question, we say the whole construct is into question because of that. Very quickly, to just brainstorm what other points are possible. Like I said, any other study, I gave you a suggestion of studies also before. Another very popular issue that students like to take is application to everyday life. So yes, for working memory model, there's very good application, especially the dual task. You would be able to link back to AO2 also. So in Kai's case, doing one auditory and one visual task serves well, but doing two auditory tasks becomes very difficult. So that has learning for students, that they shouldn't try to do two visual based auditory based tasks together. For example, solving maths problems and watching the television at the same time. Both starts competing for resources in the VSS and the PL, in fact. So it's not possible, and they should avoid doing multitasking while studying. So that could be one of your points. Another point could be that the model is limited in understanding memory, in the sense that it only emphasizes on one component of memory, short term memory, which is good, but it makes it reductionist because, again, not sure if at this stage you'll be able to take points like reductionism, because yours is not the linear curriculum, so synoptics you do later only. Still, if you are familiar with reductionism by any chance, you could say that it does not account for other bifurcations of long-term memory, procedural, semantic, and episodic. It's only restricted to short-term memory. It does not even look at long-term memory or sensory register. Just makes a mention of it in CE. So it's a very limited way of looking at memory, and you can compare it with MSM and say that's a more holistic approach. It accounts for all types of memory, right from very temporary to permanent storages. Other possible points, let me think, for working memory model. Again, it's a study only. I remember the word length effect. Articulatory process refreshes in 1 or 2 seconds. So words are longer, it's not able to refresh. Words are shorter, even if there are many, it's able to refresh. Shows that articulatory processes are correct. Conceptualization. So definitely that point will be there. Uh, Many students do that study, so it's a good effective point. And of course, again, in terms of synoptics, if you're able to apply some approaches, issues, or debates, mechanically reductionist model, applying the cognitive approach and reductionism, memory is superseded by emotions many times. So, working memory processing, if something goes to VSSPL, then only it will be processed, and, then EB will link it to LTM. Not necessary. You could bring in the point of flashbulb memories, but bring it in only if you can do it effectively, if you understand the reasoning well yourself. When memories are emotionally charged, they directly transfer to LTM. So they might bypass all these subcomponents of working memory, episodic buffer, and directly enter into long term memory. So you can give that also. These are the points I can think of right now. Of course, there's a lot of source material, and you can get lots of points that you can cover in this. One final issue I'll address about the 20 marker is, should you link your EO3 points to the scenario given when it's a scenario question, and overall should you link it to whatever you have given in AO1? So say for example, you've taken only VSS and PL mainly in AO1, should your points be about that? My approach has been to cover all of WMM. So I can take any points. If you have taken only VSS and PL mainly because that was relevant to Chi, in that case, I would suggest do take AO3 from there only. Otherwise, it becomes abrupt to include AO3 from other points. Though it works, you can take from other places, but it might not show like full understanding. Won't get 20 out of 20. You might get on the high mark band, but not full. You might come in mid range of the 16 to 20 mark band. But like I have taken lots of points in AO1, everything about the model, so all of my AO3 points become relevant to what I've written to AO1. So that's one thing, gives you a benefit in AO3 also, taking this approach. Secondly, do you need to relate back the points to AO2? You can say I have not done that, you don't need to do that. You can still score 20. If you want to do that, you feel that's a more effective way of writing, then yes. Very quickly, like in the first point I've mentioned that WMM is valid because it has empirical support. So I could just say that then it is a valid way of explaining Chi's situation, why there is interference in Chi performing the task. Then I've mentioned, but evidence is coming from case studies. So it might be specifically to KF, might not apply to Chi's situation. Chi might not resemble the people on whom case studies have been done. Finally, saying, CE is not well conceptualized. So when we are assuming that CE is allocating resources to the slave systems, that assumption might not be correct in Chi's case. See, it's pretty pointless because you're going to keep on, taking the points and just say, okay, so this would be true for Chi, this would not be true for Chi. If you want, you can do it, but I don't find it a very effective approach and it's not even required. So it's up to you whether you want to do it or not. Even without that, you can get 20 marks. Okay, so that is it for today's video, and I will definitely cover section B, social influence, in another video. If you have any questions about this video, any comments, you would like me to cover any other topic in a forthcoming video, so you have any suggestions, do leave them in the comments box below, any feedback. Please don't contact me on my personal numbers with questions about the YouTube channel or the videos or any suggestions. I will not respond to you. My personal number is only for if you have any work that you want to engage me with, like any assignment work, tuition work. For anything related to YouTube, you will have to comment on YouTube itself if you want a response. So that's it for today's video. I hope it is helpful to you, and I'll try to upload the next video very soon. So see you. Goodbye.